Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for showing up on a Sunday morning. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, so I appreciate very much that you're here. I'm Lawrence MacDonald from the Center for Global Development, and it's my privilege to be the moderator for this morning's session. I want to thank the GDN President, Jerry De La Polera, and Chief Economist George Mavrotas for inviting me, and perhaps be the first to congratulate Jerry and his staff from the podium on what I think has been a terrifically stimulating and logistically flawless conference. I also think I would be remiss if I didn't express on behalf of all of us here our appreciation of the city of Prague for the delicious dinner last night in that stupendous setting, and for magically arranging for the city of Prague to be blanketed in snow, and even for a fresh blanket this morning. Like many of you, I'm here for the first time, and I'm certainly going to look for a chance to return to this beautiful city. The topic of our plenary today is varieties of capitalism, one way or many. And I think it's a fitting sequel to the discussions that we've had so far. Yesterday morning, we heard Guillermo Calvo give an unusually lucid explanation of the causes and consequences of the global financial crisis, with a particular focus on the impact on developing countries. He concluded with a call for strengthened global governance, including a lender of last resort with sufficient resources and reputation to dissuade countries from self-insuring by piling up reserves. In the afternoon plenary, chaired by Ahmed Galal, we heard a variety of perspectives on the European integration experience and the possibility that there might be lessons for regional integration elsewhere in the world. The bottom line of that was that Europe's history is unique and its institutional approach to integration is unique, and therefore probably not suitable for export, but that the impulse of neighboring countries to work together to solve common problems is universal, and it matters less where we begin than that the leaders have a clear idea of where this path towards integration will take the societies that they lead. Then last night, we heard both from GDN Chair Ernesto Zedillo, the distinguished former President of Mexico, and from Lord Anthony Giddens, the author of the forthcoming book on the politics of climate change, about both the immense urgency and the huge difficulty of finding ways to avert runaway climate change. It was a fitting reminder, I thought, that the goals of development and the need to avert climate change are really two sides of a euro, or if you will, of a Czech crown. They cannot be separated. We can't have successful development without confronting climate change. And to give just one example, recent work by Bill Klein at the Center for Global Development, based on the most widely accepted climate models of the IPCC, applied at country level, suggested that in southern India, agricultural productivity will fall by 40% by 2080 under a business-as-usual scenario. That is, unless we rapidly cap emissions and then bring them down. On the other hand, we will fail to dodge the bullet of climate catastrophe unless we find ways to very quickly provide cheap, abundant, and near-zero carbon energy to the 4 billion people in the world who lack reliable access to electricity. These people rightly demand that they have access to modern energy, starting with clean, well-lighted places that are reasonably comfortable in the heat of the summer and the cold of the winter, and followed not long after that by the basic modern conveniences that many of us in this room take for granted. Which brings us to this morning's plenary. One way or many varieties of capitalism. We all know the answer to what Alan Winters characterized yesterday as the exam question. In this case, one or many. The answer clearly is many. The write-up for this session suggests at least three. One what's called the so-called Anglo-Saxon model. To my shame, I guess it's the model that my country has championed, of dominant financial sector, very light regulation, and weak safety nets, all supposedly designed to prompt innovation and growth. At the other end, there is suggested there's a Beijing consensus of a state-led development model that is nonetheless open to price signals and makes use of markets. And then Europe is posited as being somewhere in between, although the write-up is quick to note that there are many varieties of capitalism, even within the European Union. I trust that our presenters today are going to untangle all of this for us. I know they each prepared their remarks before the plenaries and before last night's speech, so I don't want to burden them over much. Nonetheless, I want to pose a challenge. I hope that in addition to discussing various models of corporate finance and governance, if indeed that's what they intend to do, and attitudes towards mergers and acquisitions, which is mentioned in the write-up, they will give us their views on what constitutes an appropriate measuring stick for the many varieties of capitalism. Is GDP growth still an acceptable measure? How about reductions in poverty and the nature of the impact of different kinds of capitalism on inequality? What about gender relations, civil rights, freedom of expression? What about happiness? And yes, especially perhaps, what about the relationship between particular varieties of capitalism and the environmental services, clean air, clean water, and a stable climate that the planet provides? Each of our speakers will talk for 25 minutes. So that I don't have to interrupt them, I've asked Niharika to assist me by holding up cards for 10, 5, 2, and 0 minutes. If 0 minutes appears and it doesn't sound like the speaker's wrapping up, I'll give a firm but gentle nudge. Following the presentations, George will serve as a discussant. I'm determined to keep our speakers within their time limits because I know there's a lot of knowledge in this room and I want to leave time for your questions and comments. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. I've only this morning met Daniel Dayenu, but his career speaks volumes. He's, I think, the epitome of what many of us would strive to be in combining both a distinguished career as a scholar and a career as a policymaker and practitioner. He's the professor of economics at the National School of Political and Administrative Studies in Budapest. He's also a former minister, Bucharest. I apologize, I don't have my glasses on. He's a former Minister of Finance and a former member of the European Parliament. Danielle, over to you. Thanks very much.